up until this pivotal moment on the cross has been depraved, or rather corrupt, wicked, and perverted because of man's fall in the garden. But it's the Bible which says in Romans chapter 5 verse 12, wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Hence we understand that sin had become the dominating factor within the lives of people. Yeah. And where sin is, there is a need for a Savior. Right. Yes. And God in his infinite wisdom provided for us himself in the form of Jesus to bring about salvation and forgiveness of our sin. Hence the Bible states it like this in Hebrews chapter 9 verse 22. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission of sin. So we understand that because of Christ's work on the cross, there has been a forgiving of our sin, and there's been granted unto us absolution. Or rather, there's been a freeing from the blame and guilt of our sin. And further than that, God didn't just free us from blame and the guilt of sin, but he goes further to release us from the eternal consequences of sin, which simply means that hell is not on the timetable for the believer. And eternal separation from God will never be our portion. And this is simply because Jesus died on the cross. And I don't know about you, but it's always written into the agenda of my life to give God praise for his work on the cross. Because had he not died on the cross, we would have inevitably been denied access to the Father. But thank God for Jesus, because through him we have something called access. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I have access. I have access. And I'm not speaking of access to a house. And the access that I'm speaking of is not that to a car. I'm not speaking of access to grants and scholarships as it pertains to getting a higher education. I'm not speaking of access to a better health care insurance. This access is not that of people in government offices. And it's not access to celebrities, or rather, let me put it this way. The access that has been granted is in no wise a horizontal access, but rather the access that has been granted is on a vertical scale. Meaning that through the redemptive work of Christ on the cross, we as a people have now been granted access to God the Father. For understand that the only way to the Father is through Christ. For it's Jesus who states in John chapter 14 verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes into the Father but by me. Hence understand that our excitement as a church shouldn't be on a horizontal plane, but rather, saints of God, we should have an overflowing and overwhelming sense of joy to know that the place in which we deserve to be locked out of, which is the access to the throne of God, has been granted to us by the way of Jesus Christ. And I must pause right here parenthetically, because as a church so often we misappropriate and we displace our joy in the sense of where our joy is being fulfilled. And we have, even as the church becomes so tied up in the culture of this world, that many times even church folks don't find themselves getting overwhelmingly excited to hear about access to the throne. We have placed our hopes and desires in so many things horizontally, that when we aren't spoken to concerning the things of the eternal change our existence, we have now become desensitized as a church and bored with the notions of things such as access. However, I want to inform somebody on today that if you never have access to a house, and if you never gain access to a car, and if you never gain access to an all expenses paid cruise, if you never gain access to people in high positions, you need to be overwhelmed with joy that leads to worship, simply because the most important access to have has been granted to you by the way of Jesus Christ. Somebody one more time look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I have access. And furthermore, the reality is your access to the Father is not a deserved access. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I really don't deserve this access. I wish I had a church. This access to the Father is not something in which you worked hard for. This access to the Father is not something that you can purchase with your money. Our good looks cannot gain us this type of access. You can't sleep your way around to get this type of access. You cannot finagle your way into this access. You cannot charm your way into this access. But rather, saints of God, allow me to remind you on today that the access you've been granted has simply come by the way of God favoring you. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I only have this type of access because God favors me. And this is a good place to praise Him, because there's nothing that we can do to ever gain the favor of God. I wish I had somebody. There's nothing that we can say that can cause us to gain the favor of God, because the reality is my flesh turns God off. My flesh causes God to not want to deal with me. Hence I could not get God's favor with my flesh. My flesh does not desire God. Hence there's no way I could gain His favor. My flesh causes separation between me and God. Henceforth I could not gain His favor. However, amidst our inability to put ourselves in a favorable position, God in His infinite capabilities placed us in a favorable position, and that position is simply saved. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, my position is saved. And this is something that you don't hear a lot of folks talking about in the church anymore. They say what their titles are, and they call out what their positions are, but they never call out that they're saved. People say what their degrees are, and they call out their accomplishments, but they don't say that they are saved. But I just need to know, where are the saved people at in church? I'm not really concerned about your title. I'm not concerned about your position. I'm not concerned about your degree. I'm not concerned about your accomplishments. But will the real saved people please stand up? Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I might not have the greatest title. I might not have that doctorate. Oh, but I am saved. Or somebody look at your neighbor, say, neighbor, I got something better than a bachelor's. I got something better than a house. I got something better than a car. Oh, but somebody lean on your neighbor and say, neighbor, I'm saved. Hallelujah. I'm saved. I'm saved. I'm not saved. I'm saved. I'm saved. I'm saved. I'm saved. I'm saved. Back in the days when we used to testify. Yes, sir. We used to talk about, we started with giving honor to God, and we said all that kind of stuff. But the best part of the testimony, when we got to the end, because we had to save the best for last, we said, and I'm so glad that God, I'm saved. And then we went further, because we was holy, and I'm sanctified. I'm saved. I'm saved. That was the greatest part. We were excited about being saved. Not that I'm a millionaire, we didn't declare, but we said I'm saved. Not that I'm good looking, but I'm saved. Or not that I'm liked by everybody, because the reality is everybody don't like you. But even if they don't like you, it's okay because I'm saved. Not that I always got the best job, but I am saved. Somebody grab your neighbor and say, neighbor, I'm saved. Take the seats. And the reality is, and I'm sure. The reality is that all of my horizontal gains means nothing without a vertical position. Tell your neighbor, say neighbor, I need a vertical position. For the Bible says it this way in Mark chapter 8 verse 36. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Saints of God, as we look around throughout the parameters of our communities, when we see people all the day long striving to gain the world, without any concern regarding their souls, when we have corrupt leadership in the land, some of which claim to be Christians even, y'all know Donald Trump, yet we find there is a pushing of agendas contrary to the alleged belief system. Or we have an acrimonious political system, or rather a bitter in nature political system that vies for high-ranking positions for the good of themselves, but not for the good of the people. We have folks that are setting up camps within our communities to allegedly better the lives of the people, yet their services offered are seemingly more advantageous to themselves rather than the people in which they serve. We have schools to educate educate our kids concerning math and concerning the arts and technology. But because of the jurisdiction in which our school systems are under, we have students instead they are being indoctrinated with philosophies, concepts, and ideations that are contrary to anything in which we would ever have for them to learn. And all the while these things are going on around us, we have churches that are keeping silent. Somebody look at your neighbor. Say, neighbor, I can't keep silent. While the school systems are being corrupted, we have churches that are being silent. And while politicians are within our communities misappropriating taxpayers' money, our churches are being silent. And while shootings are happening around the corner and even up the block from our churches, the churches are being silent. And while drug dealers are standing nearby, feeling the only way to survive is to sell poison in a dime bag and death in the form of a pill, the church is sitting off to the side somewhere being silent. Or while moms are being murdered right up the block on 32nd Street by jealous, enraged lovers, leaving the family to mourn and to wallow in sadness, the church is being silent. Or while young people are walking the streets at 11 a.m. At the age of 16 instead of being in school, the church sees them at 11 a.m. and the church is being silent. Or while the young girl is flaunting her stuff at the age of 13 around all the young boys on the block, the church is being silent. Or while the immediate world around us is in a heightened state of paranoia and dismay, the church has the audacity to keep silent. Or while men are walking around with drug addictions, the church is being silent. While females are walking around prostituting themselves, the church is keeping silent. Saints, it's a dangerous thing when the church has the ability to speak but says nothing. It's quite frightening when the church has the ability to do and does nothing. It's quite alarming when the church has the ability to go and goes nowhere. Saints, understand that the gospel in which we hold in high regards, this gospel which is our prized possession, is not to be held in secrecy by the church. This gospel in which we pride our lives on and build up the holiest of our faith on is not to be put on a shelf and only reserved for the people in the church. But rather this gospel has to extend beyond the walls of our facility and flood the streets of our community. This gospel has to spill over into the Chinese restaurant around the corner, that while a young boy is in there buying his pork fried rice and chicken, that he begins to hear something about Jesus. Or while some young girl is in there getting her rib tipped, some of y'all buy that nasty stuff too. Or while she's over there getting it, she needs to hear the good news of the gospel. For while she's there to purchase some food to satisfy her human issue of hunger, there's an internal issue of the soul that is going on. And Chinese food cannot satisfy spiritual issues. But rather there's a bread from heaven that can feed our community and satisfy forever. Somebody shout, it'll satisfy forever. That which is insatiable. But understand that nothing will be satisfied if the church is on mute. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, it's time to take the church off mute. Come on, look at somebody else and say, neighbor, it's time to take the church off mute. And this is what brings me to our focal text real quick, because we find here that there was a man by the name of Simon, which was in this city, and he used sorcery, and he was bewitching the people. I don't want to deal with that part too long, but I want to go further, because it says that now they began to look at him, and they saw that, or they begin to think that he must have been the great power of God. Understand that you don't have to be saved in order to perform miracles. You don't have to be a part of the church in order to have resources. But there's a lot of things outside of the church that are doing things that seem so great and it seems so grand. It seems powerful, but understand that it's just a form of godliness. Oh, but they are denying the power thereof. Simon was in the town and he was doing a lot of great works. He was performing a lot of great talents, and the people began to believe in him because he bewitched them with sorceries. He enchanted them. He caused them now to become stuck to what it is that he was doing. And he had done it for a long time. The Bible says that for a long time they were bewitched by his sorcery. Understand that our community didn't get like it was yesterday, but for a long time it has already been like this. It's already been depraved. It's already been going under. There's already been murders. There's already been rapes. There's already been all sorts of misappropriation of money. There's already been a lot of craziness that is going on. Drug addictions didn't start yesterday. year. Drug addictions didn't start just a few days ago, but it started a long time ago. These issues have existed a long time ago, but watch this. The church existed just as long. But we find that the church people stayed in their own corners, and now they didn't go out there. Why? Because we allow fear to enter into our hearts. We allow all sorts of things and spirits that are contrary to the power that God has given us. So now we come to church and we get happy looking at the same 50 people. We get happy looking at the same folk. We get happy praising with the same people, and we just bypass the folk that are on the streets, and we never invite them in. Oh, but there was a man called Philip. I like this man Philip. There was a man called Philip, and he didn't say, I'm going to stay in my corner. But Philip wasn't intimidated by what it was that Simon was doing up the block. But Philip was not intimidated by what was going on in Redfern houses. And Philip was not intimidated by the killing that took place in 333. And Philip was not intimidated by the gang banging that's going on in Hamels. And Philip was not intimidated by the drug dealer that's up the block. And Philip was not intimidated by the Department of Agriculture that said, oh, if you give out food, you gotta take down your cross. And Philip was not intimidated by what the government systems of this world have to say. But he understood that it's for God I live, and that it's for God I die, and there's a charge that I must keep, and there's a God that I must glorify. Philip was not intimidated by what it was that the people said, but he understood that this gospel that I have, that I know that if it was to ever get out of my mouth, and that the same people who've been enchanted, who've been bewitched by what it is that Simon was doing, and that they would be broken free from all of the chains that was on them. Understand, saints of God, that it's not enough for us to come here to 192 Beach 26th Street and to worship God Sunday after Sunday, but did not take this glorious gospel and spread it out in this community. Because the longer you keep silent, is the longer somebody stays bound. The longer you stay silent, is the longer somebody stays drug addicted. The longer you stay silent, is the longer some female stays in an abusive relationship. The longer you keep silent, is the longer your family won't come to church. The longer you keep silent, is the longer the politicians will run amok. When somebody look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I can't keep silent. And there's some power in my mouth and to free somebody up the block. And there's some power in this church and to change the conditions of our community. And there's some power in this church and to deliver a drug addict. And there's some power in this church to cause the prostitute to leave the corner. And there's some power in this church to cause the weed men to get a legitimate job. And there's some power in this church that can change the condition of our state. But the power is only released when you open up your mouth. And somebody lean on your neighbor and say, neighbor, you can't keep silent. But there's a word in your mouth that will cause deliverance to hit the land that you live in. There's a word in your mouth that will cause deliverance to hit your family. Even before they get to the church, deliverance can take place right in your living room. And to open up your mouth and preach the glorious gospel. Somebody read your neighbor and say, neighbor, I can't keep silent. For the preacher is waiting for the manifestation of the